Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Least Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Christ Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 136. We're covering Christus Dominus 31 to 32 on priest assignments for the salvation of souls. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday, we spoke about pastors having the authority delegated by the bishops, so they should teach, sanctify, and govern their parishes. Today, we are continuing in Chapter 2, Bishops in their particular church of their diocese. We're continuing in Section 2.3, Assistance to the Pastoral Office of the Diocesan Bishops. And we're going to finish subsection 2.3.3, the Diocesan Clergy. Today, we're trying to talk about how bishops are free to appoint pastors and change parishes, but should do so prudently for the good of souls. So paragraph 31 is the longer of the two paragraphs today, and we're going to start with it. It has four sub-paragraphs, A, B, C, D. Each one's pretty short on its own. So let's get into A. Well, I should summarize them first, right? That's how we do this here, right? So A, it's talking about prudence in appointing pastors. B is talking about there are a few limits on bishop naming pastors they see fit. C is about the relative stability of pastors, that we shouldn't just be changing pastors willy-nilly. And D is about pastors resigning when they are sick or old. So let's begin with 31A. In forming a judgment on the suitability of a priest for the administration of any parish, the bishop should take into consideration not only his knowledge of doctrine, but also his piety, apostolic zeal, and the other gifts and qualities which are necessary for the proper exercise or care of souls. Pretty straightforward, right? And I think that if we take any one skill and we're like, hey, he has, piety, or hey, he knows doctrine, or hey, he has zeal, and we forget the others, we can be imprudent in making the best pastor, because a good pastor has to have a collection of skills. Not every pastor is going to have the same collection. And sometimes you might have a situation where you name the right associate who can supplement the pastor's, the area the pastors are good in, right? And that's the thing, right? So we need pastors who are pious, who pray. We need pastors who have prudence. We need pastors who have zeal. One of the challenges at times was just the overemphasis on just knowing doctrine, right? That's important too. The priest needs to know doctrine. We don't want a priest who's saying, there is 4 persons in the Holy Trinity or something like that, right? That's problematic. That's very problematic. But at the same time, we need a priest who can prudently deal with, prepare people for marriage. We need a priest who has zeal to reach out to people and things like that, right? So that's what we have there. 31B is on the very few limits bishops have in naming pastors they see fit. Let's read it. Now, the parish exists solely for the good of souls. Wherefore, the bishop should be able to provide more easily and effectively for pastorates. To this end, all rights whatsoever, presentation, nomination, reservation, excepting the right of religious, and where it exists the law of concursus, whether general or particular, are to be suppressed. So that first thing is the parishes are for the good of souls. We form parishes, and it will say later on we suppress or make new parishes to save souls. That's the point of the parish. The parish is not there to be a social thing where you have your social events and things like that. It does do that, but to the end of saving souls. And the bishop can provide for, when a pastorate is empty, when there's no pastor of parish, or even when a parish is, they're switching over, and in 3 months, the pastor is going to move somewhere else, and so a new pastor is going to come in and things like that. And there are very few restrictions, right? The first restriction is on religious. So, to present, nominate, reserve, is on religious. So generally, for the most part, when a parish is assigned to a religious community, say the Jesuits, Legionaries, Franciscans, Dominicans, etc., what the bishop does, he says, hey, he makes a contract with the community to say, hey, you're going to be the pastor of this parish. But then the superior in that community picks who among the priests in that community is going to be the pastor specifically, generally. And that's pretty common. That could change the new bishop. I know in my hometown, Calgary, my community of the Church of Christ, who were taking care of one parish. New bishop came in, wanted a slightly different pastoral plan, and thought we would fit better in a different parish. So he gave us a different parish in a different part of town. That happens. And then, as well, the other thing is talking about the concursus. I had to look this up because this is not really common anywhere I've been, but this is the idea that there can be an examination to be a pastor, and you have to pass the examination, And then the bishop is going to appoint the one most worthy among those passing this examination on, pastoral stuff and things like that. So that can be a thing where it's general, hey, to become a pastor, you have to pass this exam, or specific where, hey, these pastors, they required this exam based on historical precedents or whatever else. And so I'm going to have 3 priests taken, whichever one of you, if whichever one I think most worthy of those who pass, I'm going to nominate that one to be the pastor, or things like that. So it is, but anyways, all that is saying is that you can't have like the noble or the parish council or something having any veto or any nomination for the bishop there. So paragraph 31C is really about the stability of pastors. They're relatively stable, but not absolutely stable. Let's get into the text. Pastors should enjoy in their respective parishes that stability of office which the good of souls demands. The distinction between removable and irremovable pastors to be abrogated, and the procedure for transferring and removing pastors to be re-examined and simplified. In this way, the bishop, while observing natural canonical equity, can better provide the need of good of souls. Right, so there is a good of a parish, right, if we're looking for the good of souls, to have a pastor for a period of time, right? In the past, some pastorates were permanent, like you would be there and you named a pastor at 30 and you're there until you're 70 or something like that. You remember the Curé of Ars, he became the pastor of Ars, Jean Vianney, and then he was the pastor there for life, right? Now they're all revocable. There was the process, I'll get into the process in a minute, but most of them, at least in the U.S., are usually 7 years. So the bishop assigns you for 7 years. Now, if a new parish comes up that he wants you to take over in 6 years, you can ask for something like that, or you can have renewed and you're there 14 years and things like that. But the idea here is that you have a stable thing in the parish, but not so long where it becomes like just so identified with that priest that it's like Father John's or Father Mike's parish. And it's no longer St. Mary's or St. Joseph's. And then it is revocable but if he's in that term, in the middle of the term, it has to be something very serious, not just kind of like, the bishop wants to give that as a favor to somebody or something like that. No, he has to have serious cause for that priest to do it in the middle of the term. However, naming the priest to a different parish that the priest accepts, he can be moved and things like that. Anyway, so getting to 31D, our last subparagraph here, it's about sick and old pastors and that they should resign, right? So let's just read it. Pastors who are unable to fill their office properly and fruitfully because of the increasing burden of old age or some other serious reason, are urgently requested to tender their resignation voluntarily upon the invitation of the bishop. The bishop should provide suitable support for those who have resigned. Right, so that's pretty straightforward. If you're sick or old, you can't no longer fulfill the duties as a pastor, please resign, right? Sometimes there could be debate about like a priest who's, somewhat incapacitated but not fully incapacitated or things like that. Or if it's a temporary thing and he's only going to be out for a few months, there can be debate on that. But the idea is, yes, we want pastors who can serve the good of souls there, right? And then obviously diocese should help priests with retirement. The exact, legal and procedural things vary a lot place to place. So paragraph 32 is on adding or removing parishes. The term is erecting or suppressing. Erecting means forming and suppressing means, or suppressing is often more of a merging in the modern world, at least, where it's like, hey, we're going to merge these two parishes or something like that, like in the inner city where, now it's, or something like that. Anyways, let's read paragraph 32. Finally, the same concern for souls should be the basis of determining or reconsidering erection or suppression of parishes. And any other change of this kind is the bishop's empowered to undertake his own authority. Right? So this is similar concerns about pastors, what we've talked about yesterday, we talked about today. And this is just a more serious thing because obviously founding a parish, suppressing a parish is much more of a, long-term move than naming a pastor there because the pastor is going to be there for usually 7 years, whereas this parish is going to be erected or suppressed longer than that. I guess in theory, you could have a parish that's suppressed and then re-erected within like 5 years, but I've never seen that happen. Well, I guess I've heard of it happening once or twice, but it was more like the parish appealed to the Vatican and the bishop didn't follow proper procedure and things like that. But anyways, let's conclude today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. I do this podcast on a volunteer basis, and my local religious community relies on donation to help pay our bills. If you want to support my community, you can go to patreon.com/frmatthewlc. There's also a link for a one-time donation on my own site, frmatthewlc.com. You can also donate to help StarQuest at sqpn.com/give. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Christus Dominus, which is 33 to 34, on religious priests in a diocese. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which will provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlists for individual documents or reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X.
Amen.